Our guest today is Chris Keates. She started as a teacher in Birmingham and even at that time was a passionate campaigner for education. In 2003, she became the top figure in the NASUWT and is now one of the leading women in the whole of the trade union movement. Since Chris took on her post, the nature of the relationship between unions and government has changed a great deal. Chris, you come from a family of teachers. I suppose, looking at your background, one ought not to be surprised that you ended up in teaching, but I'm not sure that was your first choice.
No, it wasn't. I have a family tradition of people being in education. My mother was a head teacher, her brother a deputy head teacher, my sister is a teacher. And so to a certain extent, it was going to be a natural progression.
Looking back, was there a point when you thought, I really would like a career in education trade unions, or was it not as definite as that?
Well, I think I took opportunities as they arose, and I don't think I ever planned to actually become a full-time trade union official. But there did come a sort of crossroads in my career where I'd achieved quite a senior level as a teacher. But the time that was necessary really to then devote to my trade union activities made it really impossible to try and do two jobs. Both are extremely demanding jobs. And at the end of the day, an opportunity arose within NASUWT to become a full-time official. And I chose that because I thought this is a way that I could actually do something for the teaching profession to help them do the extremely important job they have to do.
You'll correct me if I'm wrong, you must be one of the first women to lead an education trade union. That, I suppose, is ironic when you look at the fact that 70% of teachers, certainly in the primary sector, are women. How conscious are you of that, and why do you think it is that it's taken to this century for your union to actually have a woman leader?
Well, to be honest, I don't think trade unions have been any different to the struggle women have had in society in general to get themselves into the top jobs in particular organisations. And so, to a certain extent, trade unions, of course, reflect society. I mean, one of my key ambitions is to make sure that within my own union and with the union movement in general, that underrepresented groups, such as women in terms of holding posts of responsibility within unions, is actually addressed.
Do you think your members have noticed a difference because their union is led by a woman?
Well, I hope the members are noticing that I'm leading the union well. I hope they feel that I'm leading the union well. I think what teachers will look for in their union leader is someone who's representing their views, someone who keeps in touch with the day-to-day challenges that they face, and also somebody who wants to lead a union to make a difference.
Just look at the TUC for a minute. I mean, you quite rightly said in answer to a previous question that trade unions are no different than anywhere else. It's the whole issue of getting women to senior positions. When you're at the TUC and operating on behalf of your union there, is it still a macho culture? Do you find that it has modernised and progressed as much as other organisations where you sit?
Well, it's certainly modernised and progressed, but there is the element of the macho culture, and I certainly wouldn't want to pretend it was otherwise. But there've been huge changes, and for example, the General Council now, unions over a certain size are required to have one of the representatives as women. I'm pleased with the progress, but of course we all get impatient about progress being faster than it actually is.
Yes.
But I think we must congratulate and celebrate progress that is made.
Yes, I'm sure you're right about that. When you became General Secretary of the NASUWT, workforce agreement was just being put in place, the social partnership was being brought together, and I remember it was as much in hope as expectation that it would work. But certainly your arrival as the boss in charge of the NASUWT did coincide with a request from government to operate in a different way. Just take us through that. Was that music to your ears, or was that quite a big decision you had to take in your first early months of being union leaders to whether you would go into a social partnership with government?
Well, once we signed the national agreement, that was actually historic for that reason, because it signalled a change of relationship between government and unions. People talk partnership, but I believe the social partnership we've got with the government actually is partnership in practice, that everyone sits around the table with their hopes and aspirations, everyone leaves the table in in my view, with between 70 and 80% of what they set out to achieve. The difference is that we go out there and promote what we've agreed. And I actually think that gives confidence to the profession.
That is very different than how perhaps some of your predecessors have operated. And there's something in a trade union which always thinks they negotiate the best, but then they go out and attack the partner as well. It's almost a way that unions have worked. So it really was a revolutionary change.
Absolutely.
What's the response from your members? Because they must almost have been looking for the criticism of government that would come from their union leaders, and it wasn't there. So what was their feedback?
Well, the feedback as I go around the country talking to members is, and giving them the rationale for what we're doing, but also being able to demonstrate the huge benefits we've gained in the last 3 to 4 years in terms of their working conditions and creating capacity for them to do the all-important job. And creating the concept of the education team, which is about bringing support staff on.
Yes.
I find that it resonates with teachers, resonates with support staff. It's a very, very difficult path, however. I mean, you have to trade the pithy headline in the Daily Mail for actually having influence with government. And if that influence is bringing benefits to members, then in my view, it's a trade worth making.
And presumably there must be times you can envisage when maybe that wouldn't hold and an issue would be of such importance to your members, you would have to come out in opposition to government. You must, as a union executive, reserve the right to do that if you see fit on behalf of the members without destroying the partnership that you've been building up for the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, what the union reserves the right to do is to always keep the test of what value-added social partnership is bringing to its members. That has to be our first priority. But we mustn't assume that social partnership means we sit down with the government and agree on anything. What it means is we have those difficult decisions behind closed doors. We have frank and full exchanges, but we hammer out a resolution that we think is going to be best. And at the end of the day, we're all united in the common aim of raising standards for children. That's the big difference. We don't have the public exchanges that I think are actually quite demoralising to the profession and do no good for government.
Now, of course, not every union signed up to the social partnership. The NUT are still not members. My experience of working with the unions when I was in the department was that there was always an underlying battle for members, if you like, for numbers, that there was this perhaps not unhealthy competition between the two biggest classroom unions, the NASUWT and the NUT. Now, the NUT have not gone into the social partnership. So I think to some extent you must have also weighed up that you were taking a risk, that you may have lost members to the NUT. That's not happened, has it?
Well, it's a fact of life, of course, that size matters in the union world, and you need to have a good membership base. I think to a certain extent competition's helped for service to teachers in schools,
I'm sure that's
because
true.
they get a very high standard of service. They haven't got one complacent large union that basically said, well, you're members of ours and you don't have a choice.
Do you think there's a difference between a trade union and another sort of body that we often call a professional association? And I'm not sure what the legal difference is, but there's certainly a difference in image and perspective. Is there a difference? And do you see, to some extent, you positioning the NASUWT more as a professional association than perhaps an old-fashioned trade union and the image that goes with that?
We present ourselves as a modernised trade union and a pragmatic trade union, and I think those are essential qualities now for trade unions to operate with government and with employers. And we jealously guard the fact that we are a trade union. I think the national agreement we signed with government was historic in a number of ways, but one of them was that I think it demonstrated that the professional agenda and the industrial relations agenda are actually one and the same, because it was a recognition that you can't actually get high standards in any service if you don't consider the workforce. And what the government did was actually recognise they had to put the workforce at the heart of what they were doing. That doesn't mean you're abandoning the children. It means that you're creating capacity for those professionals to do what they do best. and removing from them burdens that are distracting from that work.
You said earlier on, and it's something, you know, I think it seems to be generally agreed now, that the lot of teachers now following the workforce reform has improved in that respect. What's your judgment about that now? We'll never go back, thankfully, to a time when education's not important, but is that balance of pressure and demands and support for teachers, is that better than it's ever been before? And I think latched onto that as well is, therefore, what's your next agenda in terms of preparing teachers for this new world in which they live and work?
Well, I don't think the balance is yet quite right. I think the accountability framework at the moment is not allowing teachers and head teachers to exercise that professional judgment, which is all important. And the next project we're involved on with the government is actually taking forward the remodelling agenda, the agenda we've done to reform the pay structure. It's now about new professionalism. And so the big issue now, I think, is to work with government to get the profession as trusted so that teachers can do that, the next important part of the job.
But looking at that language of trust the professionals, which is used, funnily enough, used right across the political spectrum, and I think people mean different things by it. Can I just be clear, when you talk about that new professionalism and presumably talking about further change in the accountability framework, the days when unions were against testing, against information in the public domain, all that's past, has it? The agenda now isn't about trying to get rid of testing, trying to get rid of inspection, but accepting that and modifying it so that it's more effective?
That's right. It's all about, I think, an intelligent accountability system. We think actually the government now has got an accountability framework in place that they should have confidence enough to remove what we think is the final vestige of things that don't make schools work as effectively, like the performance management tables, performance league tables. We think they should actually now be removed. But we do think that the parents have to have access to information. We do believe that appropriate testing is necessary, and we do believe that teachers and head teachers have to be accountable within a national framework. But that framework shouldn't be so restrictive that they can't actually use their professional judgment in relation to the pupils they have in front of them.
You're going to have struggled to stop newspapers making performance tables of the information in school annual reports, aren't you? It might be something that maybe we have to live with rather than continue to fight against.
Well, I just think we make it harder for them to get the information to be able to put into a league table. And we actually, I think, one of the things that the media don't particularly like is they don't like social partnership, because they actually can't get the good headlines of opposition. And I think we should be working together actually to get the media to look at what's good about the education service and celebrate it. I don't think we do enough celebration. I think we still do too much denigration, particularly around children's achievements. We've got some young people who are doing outstanding things in schools, and I think that should be celebrated, and so should the work of teachers, head teachers and support staff.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.